Matthew decides that he's getting probably towards the end of his life. He's getting a little older. He's been telling the stories of Jesus. And he says, you know what? I'm not going to live forever. And so therefore, I need to make sure that I write down the stories of Jesus so that you and I still have those stories to this day. Otherwise, when Matthew died, we'd be hearing, and then you get. And so he says, let's write them down. So he writes what we now call the Gospel of Matthew, which is the first book. It's not really a book. It's more of a letter. It's more of a short biography in the New Testament. And so Matthew is the first one there. And so Matthew is writing the words of Jesus when he writes in Matthew chapter 5, verse 43 through 47. And he says this. Now, this is Jesus talking, not Matthew. Matthew is writing down the words of Jesus. You have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Yeah, because that's what you naturally want to do. All those people who wounded you, all those people who hurt you, even the person who cuts you off on the road at a small level. But he says, pray for those who are abusing you. Pray for those who are persecuting you. That's countercultural to human nature in every culture of the world. And he says that when you do that, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. You're like, but I thought everybody's a child of God. Well, everybody's a child of God in the sense that they're made in God's image and they're created and formed by God. But not everybody is a child of God in their character and who they're formed into be. And so this is if you want to look like your heavenly Father, if you want to be a follower of Jesus and look like your heavenly Father, then you're going to need to do these things. And so he says, he causes the sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? Quick, funny little tidbit. Notice that Matthew, the tax collector, is writing about Jesus talking negatively about tax collectors. That's just funny. I don't know. Verse 47, and if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even the pagans do that? Right? I want you to see right off the bat what's going on here, because what Jesus is saying is completely countercultural to every culture of the world, including American. Okay? Which starts with this first point if you're taking notes. Revolutions are always countercultural. That's literally what a revolution means. Whether it's an overthrow in a government or an overthrow of a system or an idea, revolutions by their nature are countercultural. But I want you to see what was said right here. Jesus said, you have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. Where had these people heard that said? Now, when we hear you've heard it said, most of the time we associate that with Jesus talking about the Jewish Bible, what we would now call the Old Testament. But you can search the Old Testament over and over, up and down, back and forth, and I promise you, you will not find this quote, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. It's not there. Why? Because it never says it anywhere. What Jesus is addressing is a cultural maxiom, a cultural proverb, a cultural phrase that had been used that's not biblical, but kept getting used by the Jewish people at the time that says, well, love your neighbor, but hate your enemy. And they had said it so much that it was almost like that became like it was in the Bible. Now, I know you cannot imagine a world where people would actually condition the Bible based on their own preferences. I know you've never seen a world where people want to manipulate the Bible to make it say what they want it to say. I know you have never seen that in America. But there is something that sometimes gets referred to as cultural Christianity. By the way, it's not just an American thing. It's cultures all over the world. And so we will look at our faith and we will look at the Bible, look at our relationship with the Lord through the lens of the culture that we were brought up with. And then we will translate the Bible in the way that makes us feel better about reading it instead of actually letting the impact of the hard things Jesus said change us. So essentially, we end up changing the Bible rather than the Bible changing us.
God is doing so much here at Arise Church, and we want you to be a part of it. Stay connected with us on our YouTube channel, Facebook, and Instagram, and wherever you can find us online at My Arise Church, and we'll see you next week.